bland, uninspired, generic. Whenever you bring up the name New Super Mario Bros. Into a conversation, about 99% of the time, one of, if not all of these words will be brought up to describe it. Among the Nintendo community, the consensus is that these 6 games are the very worst that the mainline Mario series have to offer. And after that Super Mario Bros. Wonder trailer came out, showing off a bunch of creative and fun ideas never shown off in the series before, it makes the new Super Mario Bros. Series look even worse in comparison. And trust me, I could go on for hours talking about why the series is so hated on, but ever since that trailer came out and I had time to rewatch it many times, I started to kind of get sentimental for the new Soup series, which is strange. Even though I played these games a lot as a kid, I never had any sort of attachment to them. So why is it only now am I realizing that I'm gonna miss these games quite a fair bit? And since there's already dozens of videos on YouTube talking about how bad these games are, I wanted to do something a little different. As in, I make a video praising the new Super Mario Bros. Series before we enter a new era of 2D Mario. Now, what can I possibly say that is positive about these games? On the outside, the new Super Mario Bros. Series, or the shorter, more common name of it, Dog doesn't have much to praise. They're standard platformers with an uninspired plot and repetitive level design. What's more is there to say? Well, for one, we can thank the series for bringing back 2D Mario and 2D platformers in the first place. If you don't remember, there was a long drought of 2D Mario and 2D platformers in general back in the 2000s. As in, the last big one was Mario World that came out all the way back in 1990. Although there wasn't a specific reason that was stated by someone, it's probably because of how massive 3D platformers were doing at the time. You know, with how big of a deal Mario 64 was, it seemed a lot of video game publishers decided that fuck 2D, the third dimension is where it's at. And then the genre became pretty oversaturated for a while. Banjo in 3D, Sonic in 3D, Donkey Kong in 3D. It's honestly pretty crazy looking back at how much 3D platformers used to dominate the industry compared to how scarce they are nowadays. This carried all the way into the next 2 generations, until Nintendo wanted to change it up a bit with their new handheld, the DS, which at that point made all the sense in the world to bring back 2D platformers, not only because we were due for one, but also because of how much weaker handhelds are. We already saw how compromised Mario 64 looked on it, so making a 2D Mario made much more sense. And more importantly, we all know that 3D platformers peaked with Gex and Glover, so there's barely any point in making another one. And so returning to the flattened look of Mario proved to be a huge deal for Nintendo and helped the success of the DS to reach new heights. But also, the game is just pretty damn good. And that leads to my second point pretty well. I believe that all of these games, okay, minus Deluxe because that's a weird case, are all good games. Okay, maybe not the one for the 3DS as well. Over the years, I feel like everyone would constantly say that when you group all these games together, they are bad. When that's far from the case. All of them still have good controls, showcase a lot of good platforming levels, fun power-ups, and overall, it's possible to have a fun time when you play one of them. If you were to ask me what I define as a good game, I would probably bring up one of these titles. However, notice how I said good, though. Not great, or amazing, or even add the word really in front of it, just a borderline okay to good game. Let's go back to the first one real quick. When I first played it back in 2008, I remember I had a really fun time with it. You know, just casually getting through all the levels and discovering all the really cool secrets you could find. Like when I first found out that if you beat the second world boss as Mini Mario, you get access to a whole other world was absolutely mind-blowing for me. And also going back and trying to achieve every star coin proved to be a good challenge because I was a stupid 4-year-old at the time, so 100%ing this game felt like the equivalent of beating Cuphead. And by the time I completed it, I felt very satisfied with my playthrough. Now, if I were to go back to that game now, I would definitely have a very different time with it, as in I'd not like it nearly as much. But that's because of how many times I completed it as a kid and not because of nostalgia. But I would be a liar if I were to say that I had no nostalgia for this game, because come on, of course I do. Like I said before, I grew up with the New Soup series. Yeah, so don't be surprised if I sometimes call the New Super Mario Bros. Series New Soup, because the name is just way too long and I'm way too lazy to say it half the time, so Yeah. So automatically, that should render my whole argument pointless. Well, after I thought about it a lot, I think nostalgia does play a factor, but I still think that these are just good titles that can separate themselves compared to other Mario games. Take New Super Mario Bros. Wii and U. Both are again good 2D platformers, but also, this might be somewhat of a controversial take, has some of the best multiplayer in any mainline Mario game. Again, mainline, not including any of the racing or party games because that would be a total different story. Although it may not be the most functional and can actively make the game harder than easier, but it does make the experience a lot more fun. The fact that you're able to bamboozle your friends by stealing their power-ups, purposely bubbling when you're not supposed to, or straight up murdering them is very fun, but you also have to work together to complete the level, just makes for such a chaotic combination that you don't find in other Mario games. But how about 3D World? That game also has some pretty good co-op, and well... shit. There were also some co-op options in the handheld versions as well, which were actually pretty underrated. I remember me and my friends playing the versus mode on the DS for hours. We used to get super competitive because we bet whoever won would play as Luigi because... like, come on, no one wants to be Mario. It was such a weird hidden gem in this game, and it's a shame that it never came back. Because playing against 3 other people in the Wii or Wii U version is such a missed opportunity. And now that I'm really thinking about it, the DS version just had a lot of cool features in it. Like customizable bottom screens you buy from getting star coins, secret pathways like I mentioned before, oh, and the mini games. It's such a strange and out of nowhere addition, but it made for such great memories. The Bomb game was pretty fun, the trampoline one was pretty underrated, Wanted and Hide and Seek went crazy, oh, and Luigi gambling! Wait, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, not only do you get a really good 2D platformer, but also a really solid minigame collection is what really makes this series beat the whole made with no love allegations. Because even though I mainly talked about the DS version, New Super Mario Bros. U has a decent amount of challenge modes that can make the game a lot more difficult, and also a great DLC pack in Luigi U, which I don't know if I can count as a game or not, so we'll just move past that for now. You'll often hear so many times that these games are just a cash grab. An excuse for Nintendo fans to buy a console because, oh, it has a new Mario game on it, which is partly true. These games were made with a purpose to sell a console, just like every other game ever. But straight up saying no effort went into these games is just very untrue. First off, it's just a disservice to the developers who spent years making them playable, but also, you wouldn't see this amount of extra stuff in other titles. Hell, even in other Mario games. But how about that music though? That is without a doubt lazy. Basically just reusing the same songs over and over again with mild fixes for different versions. Well, yeah, there's no really excusing that part, but when you listen to the songs for the very first time, banger. And even though it doesn't come close to other iconic Mario songs, it's still pretty damn catchy. So I'll probably agree with you when you say that these games are not very creatively driven or have no personality. But I'll draw the line when people straight up say that these games are cash grabs when it proves to be a fun series time and time again and go out of their way to add more content when no one asked for it in the first place. So then, why is this collection of games so hated on? And well, to answer that, I gotta play back a line I said earlier on in the video. And overall, it's possible to have a fun time when you play one of them. One of them. One. Not all 6. These games are always talked about as one big package and never in a vacuum, which is not hard to see why. They all have near identical names, graphics, levels, enemies, etc. And when they prove to be so similar, it's hard not to see them all mushed together as one. When I talked about my fondness for the DS version, the reason why I enjoyed it so much was because it was the first of its kind, and therefore I had nothing to compare to, making it feel more original. And the same kind of applies to the Wii and Wii U version, where yes, they do hold many similar attributes, but since those games released 3 years apart from one another, I didn't feel as burnt out on the series. But when you include the 3DS version to the equation, Yeah, that's not a good look. Which is exactly why I didn't play it. Yeah, so New Super Mario Bros. 2 is probably the most egregious game in the series, coming out a few months before New Soup U, which really undermined the launch of that game. And also, it's the most bland and uninspired game in the series, which is really saying something, and the biggest selling point of the game is capitalism. Like, I know I said Deluxe was just a port, but I prefer that over the 3DS version because at least we got this. This game sucks so much that I honestly believe that if it just didn't exist in the New Super timeline, this series would be looked upon in a much better light. Think about it. There's a decent period of time spent between the DS to the Wii version and to the Wii version to the Wii U version. If we were given ample time to not have the New Super Mario Bros. Series shoved down our throats, I really think that more people would have been more excited for the Wii U version when it initially came out. Is it still a pretty mediocre launch title? Oh, for sure. But it would have been a much easier pill to swallow for fans that they would be playing a brand new 2D Mario after 3 years since the last one, rather than a good 4 months. So in the end, fuck New Super Mario Bros. 2. You're the Corrin of New Super Mario Bros. And I hate you for it. And what a sad state for this series to be in. The side modes of the DS, the multiplayer of the Wii, and the amount of good content you get in the Wii U version just doesn't matter since all these games are viewed as generic and have a mundane atmosphere. Which even then, I don't even think is a bad thing. Because honestly, it represents a more simple time in my life. Trying to cooperate with friends to obtain star coins, finding out there's a second phase to the Bowser boss fight, and then dying repeatedly over and over. This series was such a fun experience that was utterly destroyed by how oversaturated it became. But for what it is, I'm glad it exists. Because all the hate that transpired from this series was sort of a wake-up call for Nintendo. Because after it, we literally got one of the greatest Mario games to date in Odyssey, and what looks to be the most ambitious and unique Mario game ever in Wonder, which is now only made because of how poorly received this series was. And so maybe, just maybe, the New Super Mario Bros. Series will have a 3D world and land effect. Both games were given a lot of slack from 2012 to 2017, but when we moved away from those linear 3D games, they're now looked upon as hidden gems. Will I ever replay them again? Probably not, so this sentimental feeling won't have a chance of disappearing, but I'm still pretty damn grateful for the series, because without them, the Mario franchise would have never reached the peaks it's at today, which I'd argue are the best years the Italian plumber has ever seen. So it's like a weird yin and yang situation. So looking back at all these games and everything they had to offer, from the levels, the features, multiplayer, and just overall nostalgia, I would say that the New Super Mario Bros. Series has a little something for everyone. Yep, this whole video was a setup for a donkey joke. Subscribe, everyone!